biggest African oil producers, Nigeria and Angola, have pressed the button on fuel subsidies removal in the past 1 week. In the meantime, economies such as Kenya is battling unpaid fuel subsidies that continue to climb, just as South Africa is set to review fuel prices tomorrow, Wednesday, June the 7th. So let's get a Pan-African view of the latest developments around fuel subsidies and energy as we bring on Okudo. She is the CEO at Guru Energy based in Kenya. Good evening, madam, and it's great having you in our Abuja studios tonight. It's good to have you. Thank you very much for coming through. Let's get started. Are you surprised that Nigeria and Angola, two of Africa's biggest oil producers, have thrown out their fuel subsidies in just 1 week?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Indeed, there is a lot that's happening in Nigeria today and as well in Angola with the removal of the fuel subsidies. This did happen in Kenya early last year, and we've been able to see the changes. So there's a lot of conversation about fuel subsidies. Is the removal of the fuel subsidy today in Nigeria going to help the common Nigerian person? And the answer is absolutely yes. So we're not surprised because we're able to see that fuel subsidies, one of the most important things to note about them is fuel subsidies help and do elevate more towards the higher income earners in society. So when we are looking at policies and a fiscal policy and for Nigeria moving forward, I truly do believe that the removal of the fuel subsidy is in the best interest of the nation and the country. And the fact that Angola have followed so within a few days after the removal only confirms so.
So do you think fuel subsidy removals will make it easier for sub-Saharan African countries to meet those conditions that the multilateral agencies, the World Bank, the IMF and others are placing on the table for debt restructuring, for further funding, budgetary support and all of that? Do you think this is a curtain raiser? This will be very appealing to the big boys in Washington?
Absolutely. When you look at the International Monetary Fund and how they define fuel subsidies and what the impact they do have on economies, number one, it's higher taxes. So meaning fuel subsidies do require that the government tax common individuals much more. Number two, less spending on different kinds of activities. One of the shocking facts about the Nigerian fuel subsidy is you're spending way over 3.36 trillion a year. And if you look at your annual budget of education and healthcare, if you put those two together, you're spending less than 3.6 trillion. So I think that goes to say the opportunity cost of the fuel subsidy will be more investment in education, more investment in healthcare, and absolutely the big boys, as you'd like to say, the IMF, the World Bank, they will definitely be able to revise their appetite, because when they do see governments are making better fiscal policy direction, then that also creates a better appetite for investment and especially foreign direct investments.
Interesting when you look at Kenya, while still battling unpaid fuel subsidies. As at yesterday, we're looking at roughly 45 to 50 billion shillings. What's the way out of this for President Ruto's administration, since Kenya still depend heavily on imported fuel and still distribute some of these to neighboring countries such as Uganda under a certain arrangement?
Well, firstly, absolutely, Kenya is faced with a very interesting task right now, but I do believe President Ruto has got it under control with being able to pay the outstanding amount owed to the oil marketing operators, the OMCs who've been in the region. But also beyond that, if you're able to understand and look at it from a grander scale, you'll be able to see that for Nigeria and Angola, which are oil-producing countries, this is something that was already bound to come, regardless of the administration that did come into the Nigerian presidency. And we look back, even before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we already had a global recession on the brink. For the first time in history, we had oil trading at negative the barrel. So with progress Nigeria is making right now with the last administration of President Mohamed Buhari and going into the administration of President Tinubu, one of the things you can realize and you'll see immediately is the removal of this subsidy and what it is going to be the opportunity cost to the Nigerian people. And the fact that this money is being held as receivables by the NNPC, but now will be able to touch the lives of Nigerians far and wide, I believe says a lot. But then also beyond that, I think it's important to put into context. As a former board director of the National Oil Corporation of Kenya, we grappled with fuel scarcity around this time last year. And one of the things we came to realize about fuel subsidies, one, is there is a lot of opaqueness in them. So a lot does go down into corruption. And I believe that is also something very similar here. You're talking approximately $23 billion every year goes to fuel losses and fuel being stolen and smuggled across the border in Nigeria. And being able to clamp down on that is going to make a huge change. However, I do also must reach out, and I do also empathize with the common Nigerian person who has to move from one place to the next, and there has been no change in their minimum wage. So I believe a better conversation right now is a conversation regarding the common Nigerian person, what that minimum wage will look like in the future. But the number one thing that has to be stopped right now is the fuel subsidy to curb on corruption, to be able to give the common Nigerian people and all Nigerians of all walks of life the quality of life they truly deserve.
Well, madam, you've seen this side of hydrocarbon industry in Kenya, and you also into sustainable energy as we speak, as far as your organization is concerned. So I will talk about a broader energy sustainability conversation across Africa. What should the SSA be looking at beyond fuel subsidies removal as we look at the basic form of energy for the continent, for the common man? What are you doing at Guru Energy in that regard?
Thank you. Firstly, one of the things we have to recognize and realize as African countries today is, and especially African oil and gas producing nations, and also potential producing nations who are working on that, as the likes of Kenya and as we've seen great progress in Uganda, the energy transition is real and it's here. Nigeria today has seen less capex and less investment coming into the oil and gas industry. You've seen some of the major players moving out of Nigeria. And what does that mean? It means generally for the African oil and energy sectors, we're going to need more finance, because that means we now have to be able to source for that finance within Africa. So this puts a challenge also all to African financial institutions. We need to be able to bridge the finance that is no longer coming into these economies for oil and gas activity to speed up our oil and gas exploration and production. So for us at Guru Energy, we've really been able to look at things from really a three-pronged approach. And one of the major things, and we're trying to advocate and work with African oil producing countries such as Nigeria, is being able to invest in research and development to ensure that we can reduce the cost of oil exploration and production. Right now, we see a lot of companies that are investing in oil and gas around the world are looking for low-cost oil. They're looking for oil that can be recovered at a cheaper rate. So that is going to need a lot of R&D. Number two, the manufacturing sector, which again, I must say, when I did look at President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's manifesto, he talked about a lot of investment going into the manufacturing sector, and especially when it comes to electricity generation, distribution, but the biggest headache, which is transmission, which is not only for Nigeria, but for a lot of African countries as we speak. So these opportunity costs will be able to be analyzed and be able to invest it more so. And furthermore, when we talk about the manufacturing sector, Guru Energy, we're able and we want to work with corporations, companies, and be able to put in renewable energy solutions to make sure that you run your businesses, but you run them more cost effective, have a cleaner footprint, because at the end of the day, we as Africans have to take care of our environment. So I truly believe all of everything that I have said, but the major thing we have to put together is COP28 is coming up at the end of the year. Africa needs to speak as one voice. We need to be able to set what our climate targets are. But the most important thing is we have over 600 million Africans without access to clean, affordable electricity. And that should be our priority for now. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much once again. And we appreciate your insights on this major current discourse, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent. Okudo, CEO at Guru Energy based in Kenya. Thank you for speaking to us while you're here in Nigeria. We appreciate that.